Welcome to Chicago Back in the Day, a podcast about memories of Chicago back in the 70s, 80s, 90s, Chicago traditions like sports, music, people, and food. My name is Pete, and I grew up on the northwest side of Chicago. This is a Chicago-based Back in the Day episode with special guest, music booking legend extraordinaire, Brad Altman. We worked back together in the day. We're going to catch up on some memories, see who can bullshit more. But if you have any ideas for show or topic, please feel free to reach out to Pete at backintheday.blog, and please give us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts and smash that like button on Facebook. Been a long time since I did one of these, man. I only do it for special people like Brad Altman. Brad, how the fuck are you, man?
Man, I'm fantastic. I'm living a good life out here, Palm Springs area in California, and enjoying the beautiful weather. And as much as I miss Chicago, and miss home, man, it's great out here. So I'm doing. I just turned 60. So.
Oh, happy birthday, Bradley!
Thank you. I think you remember a couple of my old birthday parties on Halloween.
Possibility. You don't look a day over 59, man.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate that. Same to you. Although I know you're younger than I am.
Oh, 2 years.
2 tree.
So Brad, this podcast, I do a couple episodes here and there. It's hard to get people to talk about music back in the day. We had Zelenko on, we had Yurki on, Duff's too busy, George came on, and I've been trying to get you for a long time because, man, in the late 80s, we were part of the beginning of it, man. It's like 88, 89. I got out of school, 88, 89 from Southern. I would come up and work the breaks, and then you'd be managing the bar, and, I'd be coming in and out. I'm trying to remember who was there at the time at the Cubby Bear. Was Susie Miller there at the time of Lounge Acts fame? No, she's gone. Help me out.
No, there was a time period in the early 80s when Susie had done some stuff, in that small corner of the bar that was the music, at the time that was the music bar. And she did some incredible stuff before she left to open up her own bar.
Yeah.
But there was quite a number of years of break where there was no live music. I mean, zero at Cubby Bear. And when I got hired there, I had absolutely no idea that we would ever do music, or it was never discussed. It was never, a passion of mine that I wanted to do it, or, even a thought in my head.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't get the job because I had a, degree in music or
from Mather High School.
From Mather High School. Right. I didn't have a degree, I got the job. Frankly, I got the job because I was a good basketball player.
That's right.
And George needed somebody to play on the team with his brothers, with Angelo and Tony.
The Greek League?
It wasn't the Greek League at that time. At first, it was Gill Park.
Yeah. And
then I think it was Margate Park and a few other places. But they needed I don't want to say ringer, but they needed a guy that could score.
Okay.
And so he brought me in, and I said, look, hey, I'd love to play. I need a job.
Right.
And I need a place.
What year was this? 87, 88?
86.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I'd been there a couple of years before you came.
Okay.
Before you graduated. So, we really we had stumbled around trying to figure out what we were going to do with the bar beyond, listen, it was obviously a very successful after Cubs game bar. And, we relished that. That was fantastic. And the Cubs had started to get good again. So people were they're starting to call it Wrigleyville. It wasn't being called East Lakeview anymore.
Yeah.
Okay. Like it was when I was growing up. And it was a rough neighborhood.
People don't realize that.
People don't realize that. I used to walk, 2.5 miles to Wrigley as a kid and go to the games. And, it was dicey. It was dicey. There was a lot of gangs. The Gaylords were a big gang back then.
Yeah.
And when I took that job, I mean, it was like I needed a place to work and I needed a place to live. And he provided me with both. Never in a million years would I have dreamed that it was going to turn into what it turned into, because there was nothing like that at the time.
Right. Well, God bless George. We'll just say that now, for mentoring us and dealing with our dumb young asses and guiding us through that time period.
He and Tony, were both like older brothers to me, and anything good that happened in my life only happened because of what those guys did for me back then. I really don't know what direction I would have gone, and probably not a good one.
Yeah.
Okay, had it not been for them. So
the Jewish gangbanger.
Right, exactly. Right. Well,
now,
you ever heard of Bugsy Siegel? Myra Lansky?
Okay. I was only kidding. So did you have any part of the punk bands that from Jam that was getting put in there at the time?
No, that was strictly a rental.
Okay.
It was strictly, they made a deal with George, and what they didn't call them punk bands. They called them
skinheads, speed metal.
Yeah, but that's what it was. Hardcore, they called it. They called it hardcore. That was a once every couple months Sunday thing with underage in there.
Oh God, that's right.
It was all ages, and it was so one of my jobs when I first got there, besides doing security and helping manage the bar, was being on the stage during those shows.
Stage divers.
To deal with the stage divers. Oh my God. So yeah.
Kill the bouncer. And they would spit on you.
Oh, they'd spit on you. It was horrible. So, that was my first experience with music, if you want to call it music.
Yeah.
With music at the Cubby Bear. And that was really all that was going on there besides the games.
Yeah.
We didn't have food.
We didn't
have any of those other rooms.
Right.
I mean, this predates all that stuff. I mean, it was, and George and I would walk around the neighborhood and we'd talk about what else could we do to drive business into the, it's January and we're walking down Addison and we're, walking between Sports Corner and Cubby Bear, trying to figure out man, what can we do so we're not completely empty in the winter? Because you make all your money during baseball season and then you try to survive until the next opening day. And one day we're walking down the street and he said, I think we should go back and try live music. And I said, great. Who's going to book the shows? He goes, you're going to book them. And I'm like, you're out of your mind. Now, I'd always been a music lover, and and I think I knew more about music than the average person. Yeah. But booking music, zero, absolute zero. I mean, it was a crazy idea. So he goes, you'll figure it out. It's, I got confidence in you.
Here's the first band, Skanking Lizard.
Right. You're like, right. He goes, call Alan and call Hawk,
Right.
And obviously Hawk played basketball with us. He was always on those basketball teams. So, we had Hawk and Tony and Angela. Anyway, and so, in other words, it's going to be fine until you mess it up.
Until you lose money.
Until you lose money on the first show, and then we're never doing it again.
It's your fault.
It's your fault, you dummy. I told you I told you.
I told you fucking guys.
I mean, you know, I hope George lives to be 300, but when he's on his tombstone, it should say, I told you fucking guys.
You guys. That's right. Malakas.
Yeah. You know, and if we had a bad night, his dad would come over and swear at me in Greek.
You're drinking too much Diet Coke.
Right, you're drinking. Go buy your own Diet Coke.
So yeah. Brad, the music, what started first? Because you're one of the first guys to bring in the satellites and the Cleveland backers, the Green Bay backers, and all that. When did that come into play?
Later.
Yeah.
Because that came in after he bought the building from the parking lot next door.
The annex.
The annex.
Standard condenser building, I think it was.
Standard condenser building, and which he'd been after for years. He'd worked this guy. I mean, like, you never seen somebody work somebody like he'd work this guy.
Okay.
And he eventually got the guy to. It was great. It was fantastic. Now, what are we going to do with it?
Yeah.
Okay. We've got this building. What are we? You obviously can't. It's Cub game. It's a no-brainer. Okay. Yeah. You can put private parties in. You can take on all these extra people during your peak times. No problem there. Okay, but the rest of the year, what do you do? Well, I saw that there were a couple places that were doing things with teams fans that so many people are transplanted to Chicago.
Right, okay? Right.
So let's say from, Pittsburgh or from Green Bay or Wisconsin or from wherever, and they come here. This is where they get their first job. Okay. And I thought if we got in touch with like the head of the Packer backers or the head of the Cleveland Browns or Steelers fan clubs,
right,
that are based here in Chicago, we could make a deal with them to come out and watch the games at our place exclusively, where we'd become, because here's the thing, you could go, it'd have been great to say, we're going to open up on Sunday and we're going to show the Bears game and 300 people are going to come out and watch the game. No, they're not. Right. They can watch it at home or one of 75,000 other bars in Chicago that are showing the Bears. But if we have a satellite and we're the only ones showing the Green Bay Packers, or we're the exclusive place to see them and we have their team endorsement, such and such, this could be a niche for us. And listen, we don't need small niches. This is a huge building. We got to think big. Mm-hmm. So, we worked with 2 or 3 or 4 fan bases and, we'd fill the place on a Sunday back.
But you'd have to get all those fucking satellites, all those TVs in there, rely on a drunk high DJ to show up in the morning to tune everything in, or you had to, hey, what channel is the Green Bay game on?
Oh my God. People think now with DirecTV and with, with how simple satellites are and how advanced things are. Back then, it was a nightmare. You had to have a specific satellite dish on the roof for each group of TVs. Right. So first you had the guy coming out, setting the thing up. And the guy, doesn't speak a language I'm familiar with. Right. Yeah, I have no idea what he's talking about. Yeah. You just hit this and this, and it's gonna be fine. It's gonna be fine.
And here's your 12 remotes.
Here's your 12 remotes. It's gonna be fine. You're gonna, and oh my God, you'd wake up in a cold sweat on Sunday morning, thinking this is gonna be the Sunday it all goes wrong, and and these 700 people are going to want to kill me because they can't watch their game, So yeah, it was, listen, everything's great in theory, and then when you, and then you get there and you're like, okay, I got to actually, hey, great idea, Brad. Now you got to pull it off.
Pivot.
So, but you know what? It was, we got a lot of publicity for it. and not all of it good, because here we are, the Cubby Bear, obviously named for the Cubs and the Bears. And people don't remember that the Bears, when I was growing up, when I was a young kid, my grandfather would take me to Wrigley Field to see the Bears play, see Dick Butkus.
Mm-hmm.
And people don't remember that's why the Cubby Bear is the Cubby Bear. It's not just the Cubs. Right. So here we are, the Cubby Bear. We're not even showing the Bears game. Okay? Right. Well, we're showing the Packer game. We got all these crazy Packer fans. We got the Steelers, the Browns. And people really didn't mind that you had the Steelers and Browns. But the Packers was the sore spot. You know, people were really not cool with it. So we got some not so good publicity, but financially it was really what we needed at that time. So you got the music going, then we got the sports bar going. What were some of the bands between? You didn't have the Packer games, but you had to rely on the music. Do you remember any of the bands that you brought? Sure. Well, okay. So the plan was, George's plan was start off local and regional, which makes sense. In other words, there were all these smaller places that were doing these regional and local bands. Well, if we could put a couple of them together on a Friday night, you know, they could bring 300-400 people in.
Tickets.
So, right. And, you know, you let them keep the cover charge. So you're not looking at, you're in a hole. You keep the bar, they keep the cover. And, you know, that really was a smart way to go about it. And so we started with bands like Paul Seabar and the Milwaukeeans.
Oh my God, yeah.
Dick Holiday and the Bamboo
Gang.
Of course, the great Skanking Lizard, who will be, you know, forever
legendary,
indelibly printed in my mind, you know. But yeah, it was a lot of bands like that. It was, you know, nothing groundbreaking, but stuff that would appeal to the people, again, who were from the area states, who they'd seen these bands in college.
Right.
And these bands would come to Bloomington, or they'd come to Madison, and people'd fall in love with these bands. They'd become fans of them. Now they're back in Chicago. They got their first job, and they'd come and bring their friends and see these guys at the Cubby Bear. And it was fantastic. And it was a hit. It was a success. And we probably could have stopped right there.
Right. But no.
And my life would have been a lot easier. Probably could have stopped right there and just, you know, hung out and had a good time.
So Kathy Richardson, Spies Who Surf, that whole set, right?
Yeah, I think this was predated Kathy.
Okay. I'm just trying to get my bearings. You know what I mean?
Yeah. This is not Mike and Joe. And
yeah.
You know,
what about Talking Heads? I forget that offshoot band that they had. Were you part of that?
No. I mean, it was really, it wasn't cover acts. It was mostly regional successful bands.
Yep.
Who had developed a following that we could rely on, that as we looked at that calendar for the month of December, if we could rely on them to bring 300-400 people to the club, to the bar, then we would love to plug them into a weekend slot. And what you hoped was, out of 8 weekend slots, 5 or 6 of them would be pretty good. And to be honest, you know, whether they were good bands or bad bands or whatever, didn't really matter. I mean, it did matter. And some of them were very good. Like Paul Seabar was a very good band.
Well, that's 88, 89 or so.
87, 88, 89.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then the Tribune came in. They bought from Wrigley in the 80s. WGN started to market the place. that helped get George a little bit more comfortable having a cash flow to come in to be riskier on the larger bands that would come in. Is that how it went down?
I think that the biggest thing that happened that people really don't give enough credit to is Harry Carey coming over from the White Sox to the Cubs, and that whole Cub fan Bud man phenomenon
old
that
style
happened. Yeah, I mean, old style went out, and Bud came in, and of course we still carried old style, but like Miller, you couldn't get a Miller product. I don't know who was responsible for that.
I don't know, but those wall paints look nice. Anyways,
so it was part that part of it was something George had a lot to do with the neighborhood changing.
Yeah.
Okay. All of a sudden, the yuppies started moving into, and it became Wrigleyville. And George had quite a bit of property that he was in the midst of purchasing at that time around the area, kind of like the Ricketts are now.
Yeah.
George was the Ricketts of that time.
Right.
And we developed a friendship with the guys in the Cubs organization. We developed relationships. We started advertising in the ballpark, which he'd never done before. And we started advertising in their magazine, doing the Cubs convention. We started becoming a part of the fabric of the Cubs. And I think that was a big step in the right direction for us. And then more and more, in other words, and at that time there was Murphy's, Sports Corner, Bernie's, Cubby Bear Sluggers. Right. That's it. I mean, there were a couple of neighborhood bars down the street, but there was that's when people started to say, okay, I can successfully open a business in that area. I really need to look and target that. So that just the whole neighborhood started to energize. And I think that
then you had the All-Star game in 1990. That was kind of big.
Yeah, I mean, the Tribune bought the Cubs. That was the early 80s. Okay. Yeah. So then 84 was the first time the Cubs had a great team since the early 70s. Okay. Since the end of Ernie Banks and Billy Williams and the Star guys. So 84 was the Ryan Sandberg traded for Rick Sutcliffe years.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. And then they weren't so good the next couple of years, but then 89 was the big year. 89 was the year that Mark Grace came on the scene, Greg Maddux.
Yep.
And they weren't expected to be a top team, and they were. And Andre Dawson. Okay. And all of a sudden it was the biggest ticket in Chicago. And I'm not saying that the Cubs weren't successful and the Cubby Bear wasn't successful before that. But this really took things to a new height, because now you weren't just busy on SIU day, crazy busy.
Yeah.
Now you were crazy busy almost every day. Like you had opening day in the past.
Right.
So when I first got there, and from before I got there, opening day would be the big day. And then you'd have, until summer, it'd be pretty thin.
Yeah.
Okay. Because you didn't have night games.
I mean, September was gone. Mid to late August was gone.
So once the kids went back to school,
yeah.
So you had those few months in the middle where you were packed. But then once 89 hit, you had the lights. 88 was the first.
Oh, yeah. Well, it rained.
It rained. Exactly. Phil Bradley hit a leadoff homer off Rick Sutcliffe, and then the skies opened up. Right. So the first night game turned out to be the official one turned out to be the next day. Yeah. So now all of a sudden you got lights, the neighborhood's taken off, and everything's happening. That's when it really started to happen. And that's when George, said, okay, hey, we're doing pretty good with this. Let's let's look at growing it and doing some bigger things and going after the competition, the bigger competition out there. Because remember, one of the 3 or 4 at that time in the music industry nationally, Jam Productions was one of the 3 or 4 biggest producing show companies in the United States.
Yeah.
And they dominated Chicago. They pretty much pick and choose any band they wanted, put them in any of their venues. They had the Park West, which they owned themselves. They had Cabaret Metro, which they had a partnership deal with Joe Shanahan.
Yeah.
And, they pretty much had the town on complete lockdown. So the question was there room for somebody else to do something else that they weren't the idea was never to go against Jam.
Yeah.
The idea was, is there something they're not doing that we could do successfully and make some money under the radar?
Under the radar,
which is what I do best. No, but at that time, I was pretty good at under the radar.
Yeah.
Because I was under the radar, and it wasn't hard to stay.
Well, there was a couple new radio stations popping up then, right?
There were new radio stations popping up. The thing that Jam primarily did, and what Metro primarily did, was what at the time was called alternative music, alternative rock. I just remember, the one story that sticks in my mind is, and you like to think of yourself as, after all these years, that you know a little bit about music, and you're a pretty good judge of talent,
Right.
And so at the time, George used to rent out the space above the Cubby Bear to bands to practice. Okay.
Lovely facility up there.
Yep. Lovely facility. And, we would have when we first started doing national acts, we'd have, like, let's say, a jazz act or something. And there'd be these loud band warming up upstairs, and you'd be like, man, I wish these bands would be quiet. And you talk to them and you hear them play and you think, man, this band's just terrible. Smashing Pumpkins.
We pulled the plug on Billy Corgan.
So every time you think you know something, I think of that and I go, yeah, we really got lucky.
I can't believe they never played at the Cubby.
We couldn't cultivate that relationship, right? The guy's practicing right upstairs. He's a tenant. That should have been the first guy we got.
But it was the first big jazz act. You put a big deposit down, decent guarantee.
Oh yeah, that was.
We had a bike. We were all dressed in ties, which is a freak show in of itself. And everybody's sitting down proper. All the suburban parents are coming in, and then, wow.
Oh, yeah.
Fred, get up there and tell those motherfuckers we got a real band going down here.
I remember that relationship. That was one of the first relationships we developed with radio. Was it's funny because I was watching a documentary the other day on Kenny G. And it reminded me, because they brought up a lot of the names that played at the Cubby Bear back then. And they talked about on the documentary WNUA and how that was a new format, smooth jazz. Mm-hmm. So we had the idea to do something called the Smooth Jazz Concert Series. And we made a deal with WN. It was good for them because, remember, they're playing this nameless, faceless music on their station. And they're trying to get the audience to be attached to these artists and to, and to have some loyalty to the station. So they were very supportive of us bringing in, the Rippingtons and many of the other acts that were big on WNUA. I remember I wanted playing shortstop on their softball team. You know what I mean? That's the kind of relationship we had with them. Was we were
right.
We had a close, good relationship, and it was somebody we could work with where we didn't have to pay for advertising. They provided all the free advertising on the radio. So in other words, you felt better about giving a guaranteed amount of money to one of these bands that you'd never seen before, because you knew you had the power of the station, which was, I think, third or fourth in the city at that point, So you had the power of them pushing these shows. So while there was some risk associated with it, really no, because they were going to make sure that it was a success, because it would make them look bad if it didn't have big crowds. So it was one of the first times we stretched out and went for national acts and worked with a big radio station, and it really set the precedent, and it gave us the formula, the template of this is how we need to do this. Because look, we're not going to do $100,000 ad buy on the radio. We're not Jam Productions where we're doing 500 shows over this 3-month period, and we can afford to spend this much budget on advertising. We didn't have an advertising budget. We had an ad and a reader, okay, that got bigger every year as we got bigger. But it started as a really small ad, okay, and you
had a big graphic design team with Scotch tape and a copier machine.
Oh yes, we had a crack design team. Yeah, I never thought back then we should get hire interns or get like somebody that like does graphic design in college and wants some college credit. I wish we'd have thought of that back then, but no, we were the cut and paste kings. So it was so NUA really was that was the impetus for that. Really led to, for instance, like we would see the relationship that Jam had with XRT, which was obviously the most influential music station in Chicago back then. Yeah. And they promoted and sponsored all these Jam shows all over Chicago. And I thought, man, it's going to be really hard to crack, and get them to work with us. It's going to be really, really hard because, these guys spend all this money with them, number one, and they have this relationship for years with them. Okay. But can we go do what they're doing with XRT? Can we go do that with these other stations that are also, big music stations, but aren't currently sponsoring any shows? Nobody's bringing in their artists. So that was really the plan, was to be eclectic, to give ourselves, a number of different genres of music to choose from, and then find radio stations that'll work with us, that'll promote these things for free. Because I'm not going to that man for money.
It's man, his money.
I am not asking him for, you want to do what? You want to advertise on what?
That's a rough Sunday morning phone call.
Yeah, that's not, I'm not having that conversation. So,
How do we do?
Exactly. And you want to know something? We did pretty darn well. Okay.
So was jazz first, then country? How did that go down?
Jazz was before country.
Okay.
Jazz was the template. I saw Randy Travis in concert. And I remember telling a friend or whoever I was talking to, I said, this is the next big thing. This can cross over. Like, in other words, like, he's not just some twangy country artist who, this is a guy, or this music that the way the country music was evolving, you could sell it in Chicago, where before, no chance. Yeah. It was way too Texas-y, twangy, Oklahoma, now they're playing songs that you could hear on any pop radio station, and it would fit perfectly. In other words, like, Had the Eagles come along
Yeah.
in the late 80s, early 90s, they would have fit in the country format.
Yeah.
Of what the country stations around the United States were playing. The idea was no idea how big it would become, of course. Now, how big it continues to be.
Yeah.
I mean,
who would have thought?
Who never would have dreamed it. Never would have dreamed. But I thought, hey, I went to George and I said, I think we might have something here, And I said, I'm going to try to negotiate a deal with this US 99, who was an up-and-coming station at the time, who later became the #1 station in all of Chicago, but at the time probably was top 20, and get them to help us. In other words, have them talk to the record labels in Nashville and say, hey, I know you haven't considered Chicago as a place to break your country artists before this. But you know what? We're starting to get a lot of listeners. We're starting to get a big response. Now, granted, most of the people were in the suburbs.
Right.
Okay. But we're starting to get a big response. And, we really think that this can work here. So they helped us sell these. I would fly down to Nashville and meet with the artists, meet with the agents. And all of a sudden, after we did 2 or 3 shows, first show was Pam Tillis. Mel Tillis's daughter. And it was, I remember it was in April, and it didn't do great. I mean, I think we had 300 or 400 people, but,
right.
We didn't get crushed. And US 99 was a great partner to work with. And all of a sudden, then we had Trisha Yearwood,
right,
who we had her the week that her first song went #1. So the timing was just, lucky, but, really great. And then the big one of the big ones that pushed us over the top was Vince Gill.
That's the one.
Vince Gill, which was in May. So a month and a half into what we were trying to do. We had Vince Gill on a Sunday night. So you'd think like a Sunday night, not a great night to do a show. But if it's somebody that people really want to see, it doesn't matter what night of the week it is,
Right.
So we brought Vince Gill and it sold out. He was on some country radio show the next week in Nashville. And he talked about standing on the stage and seeing the marquee of Wrigley Field and how cool it was. And the place to play in Chicago was the Cubby Bear. And that blew us up. There's no awards. Without that was really what's put us on the map.
And you gave him a Cubby Bear jersey. I think he was wearing it.
He was wearing it.
And then George said, why are you giving away my product?
That'll be $20, buddy. I think he made Vince Gill pay him before he left. So that's all going great. Right. And now we're bringing in Travis Tritt. We're starting to bring in people that we got no business having. Okay. These guys should be playing theaters, but there really wasn't a place for them unless they played Holiday Star Theater in Maryville.
Yeah.
There really wasn't a place for them. There wasn't a Rosemont Theater yet. There really wasn't a place for them in Chicago to play. And they're hearing how cool Cubby Bear is. So they're into the idea. But of course, these guys are way out of our budget. No way we can afford them.
Yeah.
So they either got to cut us a good deal, or we got to do them on a Monday and Tuesday night. We got to charge more than we probably should be charging. Should. But the idea, if we had I'd love to be able to say that we had a budget and an idea.
Right.
We had it all written down. we didn't. All by the seat of our pants. Okay, it's day to day by the seat of our
The
pants.
best you had was that pamphlet called Polestar that says, "Well, they did this much here."
Yeah,
Right?
which really we found out meant nothing. So it really didn't. I mean, so really, what mattered was, did you have radio station support?
Yeah.
In a city like Chicago, and that could get the people to come out. So the idea was break even at the door, make your money at the bar. We would we'd give the artists a deal where they'd make a certain amount of guarantee, but then they'd get 100% of what came in through the door. So regardless, if we sold out, they were going to make a whole lot of money. And so that was appealing to them. But really the most appealing thing was the place was cool.
Yeah.
In their eyes.
And like you said, there wasn't a lot of places. And in their rider, isn't there a certain mile radius at right? So Maryville was the only closest one.
Right. So in other words, here's the third largest market in the United States, and nobody country's playing there. Now you come up and you're like, every other week you're having a big country name. You are saviors in Nashville's eyes. You're a place where they can break their artists and they can sell records in your market. And it was truly as much as you get in the cutthroat music world, booking world, as much as a love affair,
right,
as you'll see with a club, the Cubby Bear had with Nashville. It was, you went down to Nashville in those days, and you said you were with you couldn't buy a drink all night. Okay, you were beloved.
They're carrying you around.
They're carrying you around because you're doing something that no one had ever tried to do. And look, we could have fallen flat on our face. We could have failed.
Yeah.
But we got lucky. And we had a great radio station. And we had the luck of great timing that country was exploding right when we started doing it.
Right,
so
exactly.
I mean, it's like you hit the lottery. You
yeah.
know?
Cherry.
Yeah. I mean, I'd love to say, I went to, I went to the liquor store and I bought these lottery tickets, because I'm a genius, and it was the,
right.
But no, it really was lucky.
Yeah.
We were trying different things. That was one of the things we tried. And it was the one that worked the best.
Well, Brad, here's what I think, man. I think I don't know if you're into it, but this is definitely a multi-part podcast. I think we're going to stop. I think middle of 1990, we got jazz and country going. I'm going to try to find some of the old picks around, and I'll put them in this video to show. If you got any, send them over to me.
Yeah, no, I think the rest of the story, I think the other part of the story is, how we then went to from there, how we went to the next level.
Yeah.
Because now we started to infringe on the turf of, the biggest, toughest guy in town. And how
Artie and Jerry.
Yeah. And how we, for at least a year or so, we won, but I would sit on a bar stool with you and talk. I'm sure if you were here or I was there, you and I could tell stories that we probably can't tell on here. In fact, we for sure can't tell it here because my kids might listen.
And mine.
So we're gonna keep those to ourselves.
Well, this will be our first edit. We're
all right.
We'll put it up. We'll check it out, and then we'll go from 1990 to 91. Because even though it's only a year, that the Chicago music scene then, I mean, wicked crazy.
Wicked crazy, and thanks to George, I had this amazing amazing apartment that used to be a firehouse. that was converted into a condo, and my roommate was the biggest rock star in Chicago.
We'll leave that for a teaser for next time.
Beautiful.
The Prince of Eddie Street.
Prince of Eddie Street.
Hey, Brad. Hey, Brad, thanks for coming on to episode 1 of the Brad Altman Tales.
Oh, hey, Pete, it's the Pete, Brad, and George tales.
Yes.
Because I've heard a lot of people take credit for the success of the Cubby Bear, and I can tell you that the 3 guys that were sitting in the basement in the flooding and
the rats floating by.
The rats floating by. There were 3 guys. George Lucas, you and me. So
it was George's money.
It was George's money, and none of it happens.
Right.
You know.
No. God bless.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks for listening to Chicago Music Back in the Day. Please give us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts and smash that like button on Facebook, Instagram, and follow us on Twitter. Let us know what you'd like to hear about in the upcoming shows. We are part 1 of the Brad Altman Tales. Oh, can't wait for part 2. Cue the music.